like what I was talking about. Is your reality as true as you really think that it is? Imagine the spectrum of colors on a scale, for instance. Imagine trying to describe to someone a color. For instance, let's say a person who has never seen color, can't see in color, doesn't know what color is, no concept of color in the slightest sense. And then imagine trying to describe to them the color yellow. You know, you'd probably be like, oh, well, you know, yellow. You know, yeah, it's yellow. But yellow is describing the color. Most people probably be like, well, it's kind of like a banana, you know, like the color of a banana. But then that's still just, see, you use another object that's yellow to describe it. So at the end of the day, when you do something like that, you're still stuck on describing, just using an example of the color. There's no way to really explain it. You can say like, oh, well, it's, you know, it's a bright color, bright, and they don't know what bright is. There's a lot of bright colors, and you could say, well, it's bright, it, you know, like another color that's darker, and they don't know what darker is, see? So, and you try to explain it, it's impossible. You can't do it. You know, you could say, and there's so many other colors that are also bright and also light. And again, when you talk about the whole spectrum of colors, you know, you have your general, you know, your main colors, like your greens, your yellows, your reds, your orange. And then there's a wide spectrum of colors in between, you know, once you mix in between those colors. But ultimately is that there's a certain amount of colors within this range that we can see with our senses. And imagine for someone who's never seen color, who doesn't know what color is, it's impossible to describe something that they've never seen. And they have nothing to describe it to, or they have nothing to compare it to. So again, you can think all day long, there's no way to describe the color yellow to someone. You know, you'd say, oh, well, you know, you ever seen like a banana, you know, the color of banana, or a lemon, or something like that, or you'd use another object to try to describe the color, but at the end of the day, you wind up not being able to describe the color. And the reason is, why is that? Because you cannot describe something that someone does not know, that is not a part of their sense. And basically what I'm trying to get at is that you cannot describe to someone a sense that is unknown to them, that if they don't know it, they've never experienced it, they can't understand it, there's nothing to compare it to. You can't describe that sense to someone. And so what I'm getting at here is that we only have 5 senses, right? And we only have a limited amount of colors within that we perceive, whereas other animals, like I said, see it in black or white, or heat radiation. And at the end of the day, you can't really say if the grass is green or not. Again, to you can say it's green, but in an ultimate reality, because we have all these other animals, we have different types of people that see it completely differently. Okay, and you know, so I know some people might say, well, another person who sees it differently is because they have some sort of disorder what causes that. Okay, but what about the other animals? Their brains see naturally. They don't have, that's how their brain functions to see it that way. So who's right? Okay, you can't say, there's no way of definitively saying that grass is green. You can't. And what I'm saying is that it's impossible, because that color, there has to be some true reality, and in all truth reality where something exists that we don't know. We can't describe it because you're limited with our perception. What you're seeing to be true is not, it's only your perception of the object. When your senses, just like I said, when you look at the spectrum of colors compared to someone who doesn't know what color is, right? If like an alien dropped down, like I said, and they don't see in color, it's a sense they don't have, they don't know what colors. You cannot describe a color to someone. It's because it's an unknown sense. It's impossible unless you experience it for yourself, because you have nothing to compare it to. And so again, what I'm getting at is that we only have 5 senses, and we're only perceiving objects and shapes and colors that have a true identity in some other, and a true existence, and a true reality is that something either is a specific color, specific shape, or it's not, or it has no color or no shape, and it's actually our perception of that is completely distorted of what it really is. Again, is what I'm getting at is that we're only limited to these senses. So imagine, you know, let's say there's another intelligent life form from another planet that they have 10 senses. Okay, so it's hard for people to understand down here when you talk about, is your reality really as real as you think it is? Because maybe you're missing things that are there that you can't see, things that reside in a different dimension or are too small, or requires another sense for you to actually see it. Just because you can't see it based on your five senses, it does not mean that it's not there. It could in fact actually be there and you just can't see it. And again, there's no way for you or me or anyone to really understand how that would work or what to compare to, because it's something completely unknown to us and unfamiliar to us. It's just like trying to describe the color yellow to someone who doesn't know what color is. It's impossible. You cannot do it. And that's the same exact thing with senses that you don't have, that you never experienced, and it's outside of your realm of existence, that you do not know what this is. So if there was another intelligent life form, for instance, let's say on a different planet that has 10 senses, and they're trying to explain to you about these different senses that they have, that they can experience life and perceive the life completely different than you, and see things completely different than you, see things that aren't there that you can't see. Or they could, let's say they do see in colors, the spectrum of colors, their range is like double or triple or quadruple the range that we can see. And so imagine them trying to explain a color that we don't know of, and we can't even experience that color, and they're trying to explain it. They can't explain us, just like how we can't explain the color yellow to someone. They can't explain to us a color that we've never known or we can't see. And they also can't explain to us a sense that we don't know or can't see. So for instance, let's say they have another sense where they can see certain things that are there that you can't see, or they can feel things that you can't feel, or they can see life completely different because of these extra senses that they have, and we can't experience that. It doesn't mean they're not real. It just means that you don't have those senses, and our perception of our reality is completely different. And while it's a perception of reality, it does not mean it's the true reality, okay? Because the more senses that you have, the broader your experience of that true reality is, the existence of life is, because you're seeing it more the way it truly is. Whereas the more you're limited to a certain amount of senses or certain colors, is that you're limiting your reality, the truth that is actually out there. And so again, imagine them just like a color, like I was saying, imagine them trying to explain to you a sense that is completely unfamiliar, is unknown to us, we do not know, and they're going, oh, well, you know, what happens is that in this fourth dimension is that time and matter doesn't exist, and I can actually move back in time, and it's like, and it's hard, you can't explain that to someone. To them it makes perfect sense, but to us it wouldn't make sense. And that's what I'm getting, is that what you think to be true may not be. And like I said, is that just because you perceive it and you can say, well, when I touch this is happening, it's real, true, but you're also only basing that off the limited amount of senses that you have. Whereas someone else touches something and something else completely different happens. Okay, and this is where different dimensions come in, the fourth, the fifth, the 10th, whatever dimension, and that how these things do exist. Okay, so maybe people who think of, like, you know, afterlife or heaven, okay, for people who to maybe think of heaven in the concept of time and matter doesn't exist, or how would heaven work, or something like that, is that, so you see, you're basing it off the limited amount of perceptions that you have right now, so you can't understand it. Whereas it doesn't mean it doesn't exist just because you can't understand it. Just because someone can't understand the meaning of what the color yellow is because they've never seen color and they don't know what color is, it doesn't mean that that is not a color. See, what it is a perception of your reality. And again, like I said, is that for people who go, well, that sounds stupid, you know? But my reality is my reality. I drive my car, and if I hit this, then that happens, and if I do that, that happens, which is true. But again, you're still limited to the amount of perceptions, whereas what you think is happening in a different dimension, or someone who has a higher amount of senses may perceive that completely different, and the reality of what happens completely different than the reality that you just experienced. It could be completely different. And so if I say that this exact present moment, what I see right now was a past moment. Okay, so theoretically you could say that if you were to say this is my exact present moment right now, and the image I see directly in front of me at that moment, is you could say theoretically is that it doesn't exist, that it's not there because it happened milliseconds ago and I'm just now seeing it. So for instance, is that, like I said earlier, is that if, for instance, an object that went extremely super fast right in front of me, or let's say someone could place an object, let's say for instance something really fast on this desk and it was only 1 millisecond and then removed it, is that I wouldn't see that it was there. not only would I not see it, my brain wouldn't even process it. So again, if I looked at my exact present moment, I would see nothing because that moment had already passed. And what I'm looking at now, you could actually say that it's not real because there was an object there that I didn't see. And you're also seeing it in a delayed fashion. It's like you're walking around in a reality and experiencing things after they've already occurred, after they've already happened. And so for instance, regarding like touch, for instance, remember, when you touch your skin or when you feel something, is that it's the nerve sending a signal to your brain. Whether it's milliseconds, how fast it is that by the time you actually feel it, it had already happened. So for instance, I'll give you an example here. I'll show you some sequence pictures here. Is that, imagine when you're drinking, say, a cup of water, for instance, and you have the cup. As soon as that exact moment that that cup touches your lip, okay, by the time you actually feel it and you feel that the cup is on your lip, that had already happened. I'll give you like a sequence picture frame and that you'll see if you were to take these millisecond frames, all right, as this is occurring, is that by the time it touches your lip, you could say like 5 frames ago, it had already touched your lip. In your present moment, you're just realizing that it's touching your lip, but it had already happened. It had already touched your lip before you knew it actually did. And so again, it comes back to the issue is that how can it really be your present moment if it's a delayed moment? Is that your present moment is you experiencing something that has already occurred, and that you may, depending on how fast something is or the amount of nerve endings that you have to feel something, is that you may or may not know if an object went in front of you or didn't go in front of you, or if you were touched or not touched in a specific way. Okay, and then so to elaborate on this further, everything is processed in your brain. Everything that you feel, you see, you touch, you experience, you taste, you smell, you hear, is all done in your brain. It's all signals sent to your brain. Your brain then processes. Everything is done in your brain. Your brain outputs. My brain is what's actually seeing it and then projecting what it's processing and what it thinks that it sees based on how it functions. If that's true, if it's all done in the brain, right? So for instance, let's say this. Let's say that in 1,000 years from now, 2,000 years from now, 5,000 years from now, what if science got so advanced, because theoretically all it is signals sent to your brain, processed by your brain, and it's all done in your brain. If you're receiving these signals, there would be a way that you could send signals to your brain, such as images that your brain would be seeing, or your nerve sending signals to your brain that it thinks that it's feeling. What if science got so advanced is that you could send signals to the brain to send images of, and have the brain process it of what it thinks that it's seeing, or send signals to the brain that you're feeling something, that your body is touching something when it's actually not. So let's say 5,000 years from now, and science evolves so far as that you could connect like wires to a brain, right? The science and technology got so advanced, they would know every part of the brain. Imagine they could clip wires on the brain or whatever, and that they could send signals through the technology to the brain that say images or feelings or touch or taste or sounds. They could send these signals to the brain, and the brain would process it as if these things were real. So if you were to send signals to the brain of a specific sound or a specific noise, or if you were to send a specific image to the brain, okay, and the brain processes it just like how it's processing what I'm seeing right now, and it's done through signals that they're sending these signals to the brain, and what it's processing isn't even there. So theoretically, science could advance so far is that you could literally just have like a brain in a box connected to wires. Have wires connected to the brain through technology and send signals to the brain, and the brain would process what it was seeing and feeling and hearing. And when the brain processes that, the brain would respond and process it just as how I'm doing right now. And it would think that it was seeing what it was really seeing, and it would think that it was feeling what it was really feeling. There would be no way to tell a difference. The brain would process it the exact same way, and while it's just a brain in a box, theoretically, you could be sitting here in a chair doing the same thing, and they would think that what was happening was actually real. They think that what they were seeing was actually real, was actually happening. They think that when they touch this table and feel that they were actually feeling it and touching it. But again, if it's all signals sent to your brain through nerve endings, is that you could do the same thing if you just had a brain in a box. It would process it the exact same way. The brain itself would have no idea that it was actually not happening, and that everything that they were feeling was not actually real, that it was just signals sent to the brain. there would be no difference. And so that comes to the point, is that is your reality is really as real as you really think it is? Because theoretically that is true. If science advanced that far, you could theoretically do that, and the brain would process it the exact same way, and there would absolutely be no way for the brain to tell a difference whether you think that it was real or if it was not real. You would have no idea. It could be happening right now. What you think that you're seeing is actually not actually what you're seeing. It could be signals sent to your brain, what you think you're seeing, but what is actually not happening. It ends up boiling down to, is it seems to be that maybe our reality really isn't as real as we think it is. Because I mean, if that's possible, how can you really say what's really true and what's really not true? And then you also stem, again, like I was saying, into just your senses alone. I mean, based on what you perceive to be reality is already distorted. So I mean, that in itself already shapes if your reality is really real or not in itself, just based on your senses. So when you talk about levels of dimension, see, what I think about the fourth dimension or different dimensions is that the higher the dimensions, things are occurring, things are happening, and they're happening out of time and manner. And the dimension we're on, what you think is real and really happening down here, it's actually a manifestation on a different dimension. Okay, so like for instance, like say the fourth dimension, something's occurring on a level in the fourth dimension, and what you think is partaking down here in the third dimension, and it's physical, and you know, you go to the certain job that you go to and the way that things play out, is that it's actually not happening maybe in this third dimension what you think it is. It may be happening in a fourth dimension or a different dimension on a different level that you can't even see or know. And what's happening is that you're just experiencing the manifestation of that in this third dimensional realm, okay? But it's really happening in the fourth dimension or a different dimension.